Hey, and welcome back to the Fast Lap. I'm Doug Peacock, your host, with a unique perspective on motorsports. This week, we're going to review the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and do a little explanation here first. I had a video up, and I had a video that was posted on YouTube, and I tried to incorporate some videos to do something new. And Liberty Media took exception to it, and the video got pulled down. So I'm redoing this whole thing, whole narration, completely new, back to the way it was. I'm trying to do some new different things, but Liberty Media just didn't want to cooperate. So on this edition of the Fast Lap, we are going to review the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We're going to look at Papaya Oscar and take a look there as we enter the F1 circus. So far, they've let that stay up, so that's good. Continue with Lando Norris's woes, crashing out in Q3. We're going to look at that. Max Mania continues. What a fantastic pole position for Max here at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Charles, clearly now the #1 driver at Ferrari after 5 races. We're going to look at Fernando Alonso's drought. No points this year with the Aston Martin team. What's going on there? Improvements for both the Williams team and the Alpine team. And we'll look at some leftovers as we take a look here at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We're going to look ahead to the Miami Grand Prix and what else is coming up in the month of May for motorsports. Heritage Light returns, and we'll look at Ayrton Senna's first win at the SRL Grand Prix 40 years ago. But let's start off with a Saudi Arabian Grand Prix recap here on Fast Lap. As the cars ventured out onto the track in free practice 1, we saw Pierre Gasly in his Alpine at the top of the timesheets. A great surprise for the French team that is making good strides this season to recover from a bad start. As we moved into free practice 2, Lando Norris led the Papaya contingency there over his teammate Oscar Piastri by just a couple of hundredths of a second, and that would continue as we moved into free practice 3. Once again, McLaren looked like they were going to dominate the front row as we were getting ready to head into qualifying. And as qualifying dawned on Saturday evening, Lando Norris made it into Q3, but then had a huge problem taking himself out on his first fast run, hitting the wall after he clipped the curb, breaking off his left front suspension and damaging the left rear. The British driver would end up starting 10th for the race, and another disappointment for Lando. And we've got to talk about Lando once again folding under the pressure here, being fastest for the Papaya squad in free practice 2 and 3. Yet when it came to Q3 on his first fast lap, he put it into the wall, taking himself out of the qualifying session for the Papaya. As the final flag fell in qualifying in Q3, we saw Max Verstappen with another banker lap out of nowhere put himself on pole position, his 42nd of his amazing career. The Dutchman, who was talked about the week before at Bahrain as he's done with Red Bull and he's going to leave, suddenly brings that team back. P2 went to Oscar Piastri, saving the day for the McLaren squad after Norris's crash in Q3, only a couple of thousandths of a second back behind Verstappen's Red Bull. George Russell in the Mercedes was actually thinking about being on the pole, finished a few tenths back from Piastri and Verstappen, and managed to keep P3 once again. Good job there for the Englishman. P4 went to Ferrari's Charles Leclerc, who has qualified P4 or higher at every Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And you can see how just close those gaps were between Verstappen and Piastri, just thousandths of a second there, separating those two. As we look at the rest of qualifying here, positions P5 through 10, Kimi Antonelli, a great job there for the Mercedes, the young Italian in P5. Carlos Sainz, what a job there for the Williams squad to get P6. Lewis Hamilton, a disappointing 7th place. Yuki Tsunoda qualified in P8 in the highest position for the second Red Bull seat since Baku of last year when that was Sergio Perez. Pierre Gasly continued to impress with Alpine in qualifying P9, and of course Lando Norris in P10. As we continue to look down the order here in 11 through 20, Alex Albon just missed out, making it into Q3 for Williams there, but he'll start 11th. Liam Lawson did qualify above Isaac Hadjar there in the Racing Bulls. Fernando Alonso, a disappointment again for the Aston Martin squad. Ollie Behrman once again out-qualified his more experienced teammate Esteban Ocon. And, of course, Jack Doohan, a disappointment at 17th. And then there's the Sauber team. However, we do have to talk about the record that Lance Stroll set. Most career exits in Q1 as he topped the record previously held by Kevin Magnussen. A dubious honor at least, but once again, in Lance's defense, he's not really driven a very competitive car. And the year that Aston Martin was finishing up on the podium a couple of seasons ago with Fernando Alonso, Lance was usually making it into Q3 and Q2 on a consistent basis. And a nice quote from Lance when asked about this afterwards was simple, is, hey, put the McLaren drivers in the Sauber, they'd have the most Q1 exits as well. Taking a look at the race strategies before the red lights went out, it looked like it was going to be a one or a two stopper, and most teams went with the one stopper. Whether they'd start on the hards and the mediums and then go mediums to the hards, that would be the question. And as the lights went out in Saudi Arabia, the action began. Okay, it's time to talk about the start here. Oscar Piastri clearly made it to the apex and was ahead of Max in turn number 1. Huge talking point here. Max continued on, not giving any quarter whatsoever, and was forced to use the runoff area to continue on. Oscar held his line. Oscar clearly had the lead at the apex of turn 1. When you look at proper racing, you go back to racing school for every driver, whether it's karting or you take Jim Russell or something like that. Simply, Oscar was ahead going at the apex. Max needed to tuck in behind Oscar as they continued on. Oscar is not required to leave that room there. If that had been a wall, Max would have put himself in the wall. Max carried way too much speed into turn 1. And there you go. He had to use the runoff area, as you see here. There's 3 points of view here. One, if you're a Max Verstappen fan, you should say Oscar needed to let him have the room. Therefore, Max was forced off track. So therefore, Max gets to keep the lead. If you're a McLaren fan, you're going to say, nope, Max needed to be penalized for this because Oscar had the line, had the lead, and Max didn't have to do what he did. And the third point is, trying to look at it objectively, is that Max gained an advantage by going off. Oscar clearly had the lead and beat him to the apex. Max was trying to make up for the fact that he didn't make as good a start as Oscar did and carried all that speed into the corner, knowing he was probably going to have to use the runoff area and go off track and disobey the track limits. Max indeed was handed a 5-second penalty for disobeying track limits and gaining advantage through the runoff area. He was handed the penalty after he decided not, and the Red Bull team decided not to give the position back to Oscar Piastri. In my opinion, this was a huge mistake by Red Bull, and it cost Max Verstappen a chance to win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. If Max had simply given the position back to Oscar Piastri, it put him in a position to, 1, repass Oscar, 2, stay close enough to Oscar that when the pit stops came up, that they could in fact have a chance to undercut or overcut the McLaren team. But no, by taking the penalty and serving the 5-second penalty during their pit stops, it simply eliminated all that and put the game advantage right there into Oscar Piastri and McLaren's hands. Now, before the pit stops, Max actually had pulled out a couple of seconds on Oscar Piastri as he was trying to get a 5-second gap ahead of him even before he made his pit stop. But Oscar made a bold move to get by Lewis Hamilton on his in-lap. What a move it was. And it really cut that down, and it didn't get held up the extra second or two trying to get around the slower Ferrari. So when Oscar made his pit stop, it was a good one. So McLaren went for the undercut strategy and came out back, and then when Max eventually made his pit stop, Oscar came out about 2.5, 3 seconds ahead of Max, and it was pretty much game over, as the Australian pretty much game managed the race from then on out. And we have to go back to lap 1, as there was an incident between the second Red Bull of Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly's Alpine. Both drivers ended up being out of the race. It was pretty much a racing incident as the two friends talked to one another and pretty much shook it off. There were no penalties handed out for this, and it was simply a racing incident between the two drivers. It did, however, draw out the safety car for a few laps, and Max still held on to the lead. That was the race pretty much in a nutshell. There was a great pass there for third place later in the race as Charles Leclerc got by George Russell, who was starting to struggle on his tires, and put the Ferrari driver up into the podium place Ferrari's first podium in a non-sprint race this year, and a good job there for Charles Leclerc, giving some hope to the Scuderia as they look for a way to get a little faster this year. And from that point on, it was all Oscar Piastri as he brought his papaya McLaren home for the victory. His third of the season, fifth of his career, second in the triple header this year, and Oscar Piastri was going to stand on the top step of the podium for McLaren, rescuing their day from Lando Norris's disaster in Q3. Zach Brown extremely happy with his driver at Saudi Arabia. Max Verstappen would indeed come home second for his 115th podium of his, again, amazing Formula One career. And Charles Leclerc would come home third, giving the Scuderia Ferrari their first podium of a non-sprint race so far in 2025. Lando Norris would come home fourth after a good drive from 10th place after his qualifying accident in Q3, giving McLaren the 1-4. And as we look at the rest of the results there, we have George Russell in fifth, Kimi Antonelli in sixth. For Russell, had a shot at the podium, but got passed by both Leclerc and Norris late, and he came home fifth. His Mercedes teammate, Kimi Antonelli, right there with him in sixth place. Lewis Hamilton, a disappointing seventh. A good day for the Williams squad with Carlos Sainz in eighth, and Alex Albon in ninth, and Isaac Hadjar in 10th place for Racing Bull. As we look at the rest of the finishing positions, Alonso in a disappointing 11th place. He has no points so far this season. Liam Lawson came home 12th. Ollie Behrman still stayed ahead of his Haas teammate Esteban Ocon in 13th and 14th. Good day, I guess, for Sauber in 15th and 18th. Lance Stroll hanging out there in 16th. Jack Doohan a disappointing 17th. And the DNFs go to Tsunoda and Gasly. Oscar's fifth win of his career draws him even with his more experienced teammate Lando Norris. They now have both 5 wins apiece in their Grand Prix career. And it really has to beg the question that we've been talking about all year. What is McLaren going to do when they have to make a decision on which driver to favor? Because they eventually had to do it last year at some point. And this year, Oscar has made his case. I want to be number one. And right now, he is. And the win at Saudi Arabia also vaulted Oscar Piastri to the top of the World Drivers' Championship standings for the first time of his career, in being the first Australian driver since his manager, Mark Webber, in 2010, when Mark lost out to that championship to his teammate, Sebastian Vettel. And as the post-race celebrations raged on, Max Verstappen chose not to spray the rose fizzy water up on the podium. Remember, no alcohol in Saudi Arabia, and wouldn't even barely talk to David Coulthard, who interviewed the top 3 after the race, pretty much saying it was a tough race. I don't want to talk. He opened up a little bit more in the bullpen and said simply, I can't say what I feel because I'll get penalized for it. So there you go. See what happens with Max as we move on the rest of the season here. All right, now it's time to talk about Scuderia Ferrari. Charles Leclerc simply is the number 1 driver right now at Ferrari. He is better suited to the car. He's had more experience with the car. He knows how the team works. The team really has built around him, a fact that Carlos Sainz even had to deal with during his years there. And it's really created a situation that Lewis Hamilton, not accustomed to. When he went to Mercedes, yes, it was kind of built around Nico Rosberg, but let's face it, that team warmed up to Lewis real quick when he started winning a lot of races. It was Ferrari's first podium here at Saudi Arabia of the season in a non-sprint race. Obviously, Lewis winning in China in the sprint race. But since then, Lewis has been struggling with his car. And yes, we talked about this before. He's had to change his driving style completely. He's had to relearn things. And it really shows you the difference between these cars. They all look alike. They have different liveries. The only thing that separates them. But Lewis really struggling. It is only the 5th race, and that's the thing I always say. Let people know, hey, he's got time. Let's work this out. In the old days, you could test the car into the ground to get it right, to get it how you want it to do. You can't do that anymore. I'm not sure the new rules are the best thing as far as the anti-testing ban is, and we're seeing it here with somebody like Lewis Hamilton. It's having a difficult time adjusting, but again, it's only the 5th race of the season, and I have confidence in Lewis. I think he can come back and do this. And for Charles Leclerc, he did tie Fernando Alonso with 44 podiums at Ferrari. And next up for him will be Kimi Räikkönen's 52. So as we watch the Monegasque citizen, kind of step up the Ferrari ladder here as being one of the all-time greats. So let's talk about Mr. Consistent. In the absence of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for the first time in over 10 years, George Russell doing a fantastic job qualifying no less than 5th and finishing no less than 5th in every race, including the sprint race this year in 2025. So George doing a fantastic job, and if that car can find some pace, we might see George move up in the standings and maybe wins for Mercedes. And again, I feel Kimi Antonelli's job this year has been absolutely amazing. The rookie finishing and qualifying pretty much right behind George Russell. And wow, once again, what is this young man going to be like in the future when he gets some experience underneath him? Future world champion, obviously. Hey, and what a job done by Williams, a double points finish at Saudi Arabia. Look at where they were a year ago with a car. They didn't have enough pieces to build 2 cars. Logan Sargent had to sit out a race because they didn't have enough parts for his car. Accidents galore, carnage, no points. My God, a double points finish here. Carlos Sainz said he needed a couple of races to get used to the car. Well, in race number 5, he actually finished ahead and qualified ahead of his more experienced Williams teammate at Williams, I should say, Alex Albon. But a good finish there. And I'm telling you, the new heir of Williams is James Vowles is doing a great job to get this squad back to the front of the grid where they belong. And I'm telling you, it's going to be fun to watch their progress for the rest of this season. And I'm super excited to see Williams doing well. And the other rookie we have to talk about is Isaac Hadjar, who scored points again, his second race that he scored points this season. The Frenchman doing well and finishing ahead of Liam Lawson in the race. And it's time to ask the question, what's going on with Fernando Alonso? He sits currently after 5 races with no points. Lance Stroll has 10 in the World Championship driver standings. Of course, 8 of those coming at the Australian Grand Prix, in which Fernando crashed out of in the rain. But still, not since his debut season in 2001 in Minardi has Fernando Alonso gone pointless. He says he might go pointless this season as the car is just simply undrivable at times. We know Aston Martin is putting everything into the Adrian Newey car for 2026 and the new regulations, and Alonso is its only hope. And I think it's the light at the end of the tunnel. But this may be an absolute miserable season for the Spaniard, the most experienced driver of all time in Formula One. Lando Norris did pick up the fastest lap here for Saudi Arabia. Bit of a consolation prize after the disappointment he had crashing out in Q3. And time to look at the World Championship standings. As we look at the top 10, Oscar Piastri is at the top after 5 rounds, a 10 points lead over his McLaren teammate Lando Norris. Max Verstappen there in third, 12 points back of Piastri, only 2 points back of Norris. We have Russell in 4th, Leclerc in 5th, Antonelli in 6th, Hamilton there in 7th behind Kimi Antonelli, interestingly enough. Alex Albon there in 8th, a good place there for Williams. Esteban Ocon in 9th, and finishing out the top 10 is Lance Stroll. And it's time to look at 11 through 20 in the World Drivers' Championship standings. Nico Hülkenberg tied with Ollie Behrman and Pierre Gasly with 6 points apiece. Then we've got Isaac Hadjar, Yuki Tsunoda, and Carlos Sainz with 5 points apiece. Kind of interesting how Hadjar and Tsunoda are tied for points, and one got promoted to the big team. And we have the no points finishers so far as Fernando Alonso, Liam Lawson, Jack Doohan, and Gabriel Bortoleto. And let's look at the DHL Fastest Pit Stops Award here for Saudi Arabia. Once again, Ferrari is dominating pit stops. They've won the DHL award at all 5 rounds this season. Leclerc with a 2-second pit stop for the Scuderia. Hamilton not far behind with a 2.07. Maybe they had some special help from some guy named Guido. And it's time to take a look at the Constructors' point standings after 5 rounds. We see McLaren on top with 188, over Mercedes with 111. Red Bull all alone with Max Verstappen in 3rd. Ferrari making a good recovery after the disaster they had in China, being double disqualified there in 4th. Williams doing a fantastic job in 5th. They lead over Haas, Aston Martin, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, Kick Sauber, and Alpine. And as we conclude our recap of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, congratulations to Oscar Piastri on his 3rd win of the season, 5th of his career, 10-point lead in the Drivers' Championship. He has asserted himself as certainly a force for the Papaya Orange team of McLaren. And what will happen for the rest of the season? Well, they have to run the races. 19 races to go, 5 more sprints. Miami next. There is a sprint race in Miami. Lots of points on the table. Let's see what Oscar can do. And we're all excited to watch. And now it's time for the return of Heritage Life.
It was a wet, miserable day. Torrential rain.
Conditions unbelievable. If you had it today, there's no way they'd start the race. Cars were going off left, right and centre. Ayrton kept it on the track.
He had ways of finding where that grip was. How was turn 4 the previous lap? How was turn 5 the previous lap? Has it rained anymore? Has it stopped? He would be computing all of that to find that bit of track that had the most grip. He was an exceptional talent.
The 2 JPS Lotus lead the field.
1,000 horsepower, no traction control, no paddle shifts, no pit stop, no radio. He was just there.
Ayrton was metronomic, lap after lap after lap. Over a minute ahead of second place and lapped everybody else in the field apart from second place.
First pole position, flag to flag victory, fastest lap as well. Ayrton had really arrived in Formula 1.
Yes, that was quite the magical day in Estoril, Portugal in 1985. 40 years ago this week, Ayrton Senna won the first of his 41 victories in Formula 1. He would go on to win 3 world championships. That day in Estoril, in the pouring rain, a race that today they would not run, Ayrton Senna dominated the field, lapping everyone but second place, which happened to be, amazingly enough, Alain Prost. That black and gold Lotus, dancing through the rain, everyone going off the track, Ayrton keeping it on, and his first victory for the Brazilian. Again, in my opinion, the greatest driver of all time, Ayrton Senna. And remember him this week with his first victory in Formula 1. After the triple header and this week off, Formula 1 will return at the Grand Prix in Miami on the weekend of the 2nd through the 4th. It is a sprint race weekend as well. Should be quite interesting to see what updates the teams bring after having the week off. And then we'll head to Imola for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix on May 18th. This probably will be the last race at Imola as Liberty looks to drop it off the calendar for 2026. And the third race in May will be Monaco, the jewel in the Formula 1 calendar, as the big F1 cars attack the streets of Monte Carlo. Can Charles repeat? And IndyCar has a triple header in the month of May as well, starting off at the Grand Prix of Alabama at the Barber Motorsports Park, May 4th through the 6th. The following weekend, they head to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course for the Indy Grand Prix, the 8th through the 10th. Then practice for the Big Daddy of them all starts on the 13th. The greatest spectacle in racing, the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500 on the Speedway. Joseph Newgarden, the 2-time defending champion, looks to go for 3 in a row. And is that enough racing? No! The World Endurance Challenge has the 6 hours of Spa on May 10th. IMSA has Laguna Seca on the same weekend on May 11th. And a race in Detroit on the 31st that they share with IndyCar. There's more racing to come even still. 2 rally events coming up. This weekend we have the Rally of Spain, the 24th through the 26th, and the Rally of Portugal on the 15th of May will conclude. It's going to be a busy month of May here on Fast Lap. Hey, and that'll conclude this edition of the Fast Lap. Thanks for being patient this week with having to recut this video after our videos were deleted. Also a reminder, the 6 hours of Imola is posted in a separate video on our YouTube page. Busy month of May coming up. And once again, we want to thank you for watching. And until next time, this has been the Fast Lap.